All right. So when we talk about Jesus' covenant of priesthood, right? This one should be fairly simple. Go to Hebrews chapter 5 first. Now, the reason I'm making this short lesson about Jesus' covenant of priesthood is because a lot of people don't understand that Christ wasn't an high priest until after he had performed his passion, right? When we say the passion of Christ or what's called the passion, you might find that in Acts chapter 1. And it was something that he did in order to find favor and glory with God. You see this in the past as well with others, right? Like Levi. And that's what we want to talk about, that Levi made a God made a covenant with Levi due to the fear for which they feared him. Just like you see Phinehas. Phinehas had an eternal covenant made with him because of his zeal for the Most High. And likewise, Christ was deemed an high priest after the order of Melchizedek due to the fact that he was obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. So in Hebrews chapter 5, this is what it says in verse 7 through 9, right? Matter of fact, let me start at verse 1. For every high priest taken from amongst men is ordained for men in things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins, who can have compassion on the ignorant and them that are out of the way, for that he himself also is compassed about with infirmity, and by reason hereof he ought, as for the people, so also for himself to offer for sins. And no man taketh this honor upon himself, but he that is called of God, as was Aaron. So Christ glorified not himself to be made an high priest. Now, see, that's important. When we look at that word to be made an high priest, that is the word made, which is genhomi, meaning caused to be, that he was caused to be an high priest. But he that said unto him, Thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee, which is a reference to the resurrection when he was declared to be the Son of God with power by the resurrection of the dead according to the Spirit of holiness. Romans chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. Hebrews 5:6. As he saith also in another place, Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Well, see, this couldn't have took place until after his death. And I would argue why it can't take place till after his death. Because one, Hebrews 5:5, where it says, Thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. This comes in chronological order of Psalm 2. In Psalm 2, you see the heathen raging, the people imagining a vain thing. They're gathered together against Yah and against his Mashiach. They break their bands, cast them away from them, but he that sits in the heavens shall laugh. So the crucifixion had to take place first, right? Then he says, Yet have I set my heel upon my holy hill Zion. The Lord will declare a decree. Yah has said unto me, Thou art my son, this day I have begotten thee. So just from chronological order of Psalm 2, we see that the Messiah being declared to be the Son of God, or the begotten from, or firstborn from the dead, has to take succession after the people and the Gentiles have raged and the people have imagined a vain thing. Now, these things are all played out in Acts, right? The apostle Peter says in Acts that this took place when Pontius Pilate and Herod and the Jews had gathered together to crucify the Messiah. But God had risen him from the dead. In Acts 13, the apostle Paul uses this reference also from Psalm 2 and Acts 13 when he says that he has fulfilled these promises by raising Jesus from the dead. And then he quite literally says, as it is written in the second Psalm, and then quotes the relevant phrase, Thou art my son, this day I have begotten thee. A lot of people get confused about this because they'll say, well, when he was baptized, he said, This is my son, right? In whom I'm well pleased. But that's different. That's talking about an error. When we see this in Hebrews 5:5, this is what you would think of as a coronation phrase, meaning that he is being seated in the power of authority according to his dominion. Christ didn't have that while he was on earth. That's why he told them at his trial, at least he told the Pontius Pilate, he asked him if he was a king. He said, yeah, for this reason I was born into the world, but my kingdom is not yet from hence, or my kingdom is not of this world, meaning not pertaining to this. He would not come into his kingdom until after the death, burial, and resurrection, right? That's when we start hearing about the kingdom of his dearly beloved son. That's when Hebrews 1 talks about how he received his throne from God, a scepter of righteousness, um, a kingdom, that he was anointed with the oil of gladness above his fellows. This all takes place after the resurrection. Likewise, in Hebrews 5:6, where it says, as he saith also in another place, thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Well, heck, he couldn't have been a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek before he died, because he died. So he would have had to been installed twice. You see, you understand what I'm saying? That's an issue. A lot of people always forget that Jesus died. It even says in another place in the writer of Hebrews that these priests are not able to continue by reason of death, because they actually die. I believe this in Hebrews chapter 7. So he died. So this pronouncement of being a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek can only take place after the resurrection of Christ. Writer of Hebrews is very specific about this, very methodical. In Hebrews 5:7, it says, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, he was heard in that he feared. That's important, right? He was heard in that he feared. See, this is why God actually raised him from the dead and made his covenant with him, or performed the oath, because of his passion, right? So where you actually see that word passion referring to the crucifixion is actually in Acts chapter 1, where it says, the former treatise, this is verse 1, have I made, O Theophilus, of all that Jesus began to do and to teach, until the day he was taken up. After that, through the Holy Spirit, he had given commandments unto the apostles whom he had chosen, to whom also he had showed himself alive after his passion by many infallible proofs, being seen of them 40 days, and speaking of the things pertaining to the kingdom of God. That word passion there is the word paschoo in the Greek, which means to experience a sensation or impression, usually painful, feel, passion, suffer, vex. Now, when we take a look at Christ, how he had offered up prayers and supplications with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, he was heard in that he feared. According to Hebrews 13:20, the God of peace, right, which is the Father, brought again from the dead our Lord Jesus Christ. Now, I'm going to read that for you real quick. I'm going to explain to you something here. In Hebrews chapter 13, verse 20, it says, now the God of peace, that's the Father, that brought again from the dead our Lord Yeshua, that great shepherd of the sheep, through the blood of the everlasting covenant, make you perfect in every good work, to do his will, working in you that which is well pleasing in his sight, through Yeshua Messiah, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen. And when they say through Yeshua Messiah, it's through his example. He's already laid that premise out as he's gone throughout this, that, we should strive as he did. He suffered unto blood. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever, meaning that he is like the bedrock of our faith. He is someone that we can always look to as the example, as a leader, as a shepherd, as a captain, even calling him the captain of our faith, or they use the word archegos, which they'll render like the author of our faith. But basically, he's the one who is the forerunner, meaning he is the one who led the way and we follow him. That's how we, through Yeshua Messiah, are well pleasing unto the Father, by imitating him. Now, when you actually see here, it says, who brought again from the dead Jesus Christ, and then it says, the great shepherd of the sheep, through the blood of the everlasting covenant, right? Now, the sacrifice that the Mashiach actually offered, all right, was affliction for righteousness. A lot of people don't get that, right? Because they don't talk about it. A lot of people, when they think of the Messiah dying, they think he was, basically slaughtered like an animal, kind of like an animal sacrifice would be. We talked about it before, somewhat of what people would call human sacrifice. But that's not actually the sacrifice that was well pleasing. The sacrifice to Yah was the fact that he humbled himself unto death. It was his obedience. It was Christ's obedience that was pleasing to the Father. The Father wasn't pleased that people spit in Christ's face. I mean, come on, let's keep it real. Who would be pleased for somebody spitting in their child's face? He wasn't pleased the fact that he got, a crown of thorns cracked on his head. He wasn't pleased with the fact that the people mocked him and taunted him, made him carry the wood. They weren't, Father wasn't well pleased and so delightful at the fact that they condemned him as a liar, as a blasphemer. So we got to understand here what's actually going on when it comes from the Father's perspective. From the Father's perspective, Yeshua was obedient to all of which his Father had told him to do. It's because of this he suffered at the hands of wicked men, according to Acts chapter 2. Okay. So when we talk about Yeshua's offering, it was actually the sacrifice of affliction for righteousness. And so if we actually go to Psalm 18, right? In Psalm 18 and verse 19 and 20, this is what it says. He brought me forth also into a large place. He delivered me because he delighted in me. You remember that in Hebrews chapter 5, where he said, he gave supplication with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death. He was heard in that he feared. See, the Most High brought him into a large place. He delivered him because he delighted in him. Why did the Father delight in him? Why did he say that about Yeshua at the baptism, right? This is my son in whom I'm well pleased and who I delight in, because his servant was going to fulfill all his will, according to Isaiah chapter 42 and verse 1 through most of it down to 6, but I'm going to read to verse 6, right? Isaiah 42:1. Behold my servant, whom I uphold, mine elect, that's my chosen, in whom my soul delighteth, right? He delighted in him. I have put my spirit upon him. He shall show forth judgment to the Gentiles. He shall not cry nor lift up his voice to be heard in the street. A bruised reed shall he not break, a smoking flax shall not be quenched. He shall bring forth judgment unto truth. He shall not fail nor be discouraged till he has set judgment in the earth. And the isles shall wait for his law. Thus saith Elohim, Yahweh, he that created the heavens and stretcheth them out, he that spreadeth the earth and that which cometh out of it, he that giveth bread unto the people upon it, and the spirit to them that walk therein. I, Yahweh, have called thee in righteousness, and will hold your hand, and will keep you, and give you for a covenant of the people and a light for the Gentiles, to open the blind eyes, to bring out the prisoners from the prison, and them that sit in darkness in the prison house. I am Yahweh, that is my name, and my glory will I not give to another, neither my praise to graven images. Now, well, obviously he's not talking about his servant there. He's going to give his spirit to his servant, and his servant's going to show forth his glory unto the to the world, right? So we see here that the Protestants and everybody always jack that up. But anyway, so when we go back to Psalm 18, look at this in verse 19, right, and 20. It says, he brought me forth also into a large place. He delivered me. That means he saved me because he delighted in me. Yahweh rewarded me according to my righteousness. According to the cleanness of my hands, he hath recompensed me. For I have kept the ways of Yahweh and have not wickedly departed from my God. For all his judgments were before me, and I did not put away his statutes from me. I was also upright before him, and I kept myself from mine iniquity. Therefore hath Yahweh recompensed me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands, in his eyesight. With the merciful thou shalt show thyself merciful, with the upright man thou shalt show thyself upright. Okay, so he rewarded his servant for doing his will according to the cleanness of his hands, and had recompensed him according to his righteousness. This is important, right? So when we read there in Psalm 2, and also in Philippians 2, that he humbled himself unto death, therefore God has highly exalted him. Psalm 2, it would say that they gather together against Yahweh and against his Mashiach. He in the heavens laughs. He has set his king upon his holy hill. Well, why? Because he had fulfilled his will. When we take a look at this, for example, in Psalm 22, which I'm not going to go all the way through this psalm, but you should know it. It's the psalm that starts off, my God, why have you forsaken thee? Why are you so far from helping me, from the words of my roaring, etc.? This is the suffering servant, right? The one who's afflicted. In verse 21, it says, save me from the lion's mouth, for you have heard me from the horns of the wild ox. I will declare your name unto my brethren. In the midst of the congregation, I will praise you. Now, in verse 24, it says, for he hath not despised nor abhorred the affliction of the afflicted, neither hath he hid his face from him, but when he cried unto him, he heard. So see, he actually did hear Mashiach and saved him out of death, even the death of the cross, raising him up back to life, quickening him, and giving him immortality and incorruptibility, glory and honor. And this is so important for us, as we've been talking about with the justification of Romans 6, because also if we are afflicted with him, Yahweh will not abhor our affliction. If we are faithful unto death, as it says in Revelation chapter 2, we shall receive a crown of life. If we ourselves are buried with him, we ourselves will be risen with him. We will be given immortality, incorruption, glory, and honor, etc. You see how this works? This is a body. This is a union thing. So a lot of these passages that you're reading, they can be appropriated to the Mashiach, but you can also take these verses and appropriate them unto those who are in Mashiach, because they experience the same things. The fact that they go through the same things, they're tried in the same ways, they also receive common reward, right? Being co-crucified, co-resurrected with Christ. Now, when we take a look at the fact that he was heard and that he was saved, and so a covenant was made, let's take a look at Psalm 41 through 3, right? This is Psalm 40, verses 1 through 3. It says, to the chief musician, a psalm of David, I waited patiently for Yahweh, and he inclined unto me, and he heard my cry. Does this sound familiar? He brought me up also out of a horrible pit. Does that sound familiar? Out of the miry clay, and set my feet upon a rock, and established my goings. And he hath put a new song. Does that sound familiar? They sung a new song unto the Lamb, the song of the Lamb, etc. In my mouth, even praise unto our God. Many shall see and fear, and shall trust in Yahweh. Blessed is that man that maketh the Yahweh his trust, and respecteth not the proud, nor such as turn aside to lies. Many, O Yahweh, my Elohim, are your wonderful works which thou hast done, and your thoughts which are to usward, they cannot be reckoned in order unto thee. I will declare and speak of them. They are more than can be numbered, right? Sacrifice and offering you did not desire. Mine ears have you opened. You see, Yahweh, you didn't want me to offer up bulls and goats and lambs and all this. You wanted me to be obedient. A body you have prepared for me, that I should be a living sacrifice. That's very familiar to Romans chapter 12. where it says that we should present our bodies a living sacrifice, holy and unblameable, which is our reasonable service. What was Yeshua's reasonable service? Yahweh didn't want Yeshua to offer up any blood of the bulls or the goats or the lambs or the he goat, whatever it is. He wanted obedience. Obedience is going to require sacrifice. Sacrifice requires suffering. Suffering brings forth affliction. Those who abide faithful remain in righteousness. This is the process of what Yahweh is actually showing us about justification and ultimately the redemption and salvation, which we saw wrought for Jesus. A lot of people don't know that Jesus was saved. Yes, Jesus received salvation, just like we all must receive salvation. That's what Hebrews 5 is all about. It quite literally says, who in the days of his flesh, when he offered up strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, the salvation, that's justification. Because condemnation is death, as we talked about. Justification is life. Justification is the resurrection. Condemnation.
Condemnation.
Yeah, what's going on? Can I help you?
Yeah, man. I'm just
Did you have a question?
yeah, I'm just up here listening. You preached a good word, man.
Did you have a question?
Yeah. So, what is priesthood?
Yeah, hold. Let me just put you down in the audience right quick. I'll let you up
All
after,
right.
cause yeah, no problem, no problem. Just till I get done with this here, because that trailed off a little bit when you asked what was priesthood. I thought you had a relevant question to this. So what we see very clearly is he was heard, he was saved, the covenant was made. When we go to Psalm 69, 13 through 16, right? In Psalm 69, verse 13, it says, but as for me, my prayer is unto you, O Yahweh, in an acceptable time, O Elohim, in the multitude of your mercy, hear me. In the truth of your salvation, deliver me out of the mire and let me not sink, right? Deliver me from the pit. Let me be delivered from them that hate me, and out of the deep waters. Let not the water flood overflow me, neither let me be swallowed up, and let not the pit shut her mouth upon me. Hear me, O Yahweh, for thy loving kindness is good. Turn unto me according to the multitude of your mercies, and hide not your face from your servant, for I am in trouble. Hear me speedily. Draw nigh unto my soul and redeem it. Deliver me because of my enemies. So, see, this person's soul had to be redeemed from death. Yeshua's soul had to be redeemed from death, according to the writer of Hebrews, just like we've seen in the other places. In Psalm 69:19, it even says, thou hast known my reproach and my shame and my dishonor. My adversaries are all before me. Reproach hath broken my heart, and I am full of heaviness. And I looked for some to take pity, but there was none, and for comforters, but I found none. They gave me also gall for my meat. Have we heard that before? And in my thirst, they gave me vinegar to drink. We heard that before, going in line with Psalm 22, Psalm 69. Let their table become a snare before them, and that they should have been for their welfare. Let it become a trap. I mean, people don't really talk about Jesus praying that way. David prayed that way. You know how shocking that is for a lot of people if they really understood that hear the prayer of the righteous, which would be Yeshua in this example that I'm using, is actually praying for the wicked to be trapped, that they will actually be for ensnared in their own devices. Interesting. But he is asking for salvation for himself, that he will be delivered from those who hate him and those who reproach him. Kind of like, I pray for them. I pray not for the world, but for those which thou hast given me, that where I am, they may be also, that they may be delivered from the snare, from the hand of the wicked. He said in the prayer that he gave to the Father, I do not pray that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil. In Psalm 69:23, it says, let their eyes be darkened. Look at Yeshua's prayer. Look at the prayer of the righteous. Let the wicked's eyes be darkened, that they see not, and make their loins continually to shake, to be in fear, dismayed, discomfited, and with no understanding. When your eyes are darkened, it means that you remain amongst the dead. So he's telling, do not raise them to life, Father. Do not raise them unto salvation, O God. I mean, somebody would say that's blasphemy. Jesus would never say anything like that. Jesus wouldn't pray like that. But this is how the righteous would pray. Righteous would pray that you get your teeth knocked out. The righteous would pray that Satan would stand at your right hand and that your mother and your children and all be vagabonds and fatherless, and that you be in the offscoring of the earth because you reproached Yahweh and his anointed. That's just the way that they would do things. In Psalm 69:24, it says, pour out thine indignation upon them. Look at this prayer. Pour out your indignation upon them. So we should pray like this more. Oh, Father, my soul is grievously vexed. These people are troubling me. I seek to keep thy commandments. They're continually against me. Oh, Yahweh, pour out indignation against my enemies. Drag them into the pit that they sought to take me in, oh God. You see, this is, yes, the words of the righteous. This is the words of the one who wants to be delivered. Psalm 69:24. And let thy wrathful anger take hold on them. Let their habitation be desolate, and let none dwell in their tents, for they persecute him whom you have smitten, and they talk to the grief of those you have wounded. Add iniquity to their iniquity, and let them not come into your righteousness, meaning your justification, as we talked about in the last 3 lessons. Let them not be justified when they stand before you, Yahweh. Let them be condemned. That's very interesting, isn't it? I mean, who would have ever thought that Yeshua would pray like this? Who would have ever thought that righteous men would pray like this from what we hear in churches today? But you see this, oh, well, we're just going to pray for them that, that they'll see the light. But here these men are praying in the way and in a fashion of saying, do not let them come into your righteousness. When they stand before you, let them be condemned. Matter of fact, oh Yahweh, let their habitation be desolate, and let none dwell in their tents. Let their seed be cut off from the earth. Pour out your indignation upon them. Bring about upon them snares, traps, fire, and brimstone. This is how they're praying. Even in Psalm 69:28, he says, let them be blotted out of the book of the living and not be written with the righteous. But I am poor and sorrowful. Let your salvation, O God, set me on high. Right. Let the enemies be brought to nothing, O Yahweh, that come up against you and against your anointed. But save me, O Yahweh. Lift me up, set me on high. That word there, set me on high, should remind you. Remember, this is the psalm that's correlating to Christ's crucifixion. So they gave him vinegar to drink. He said, I thirst. It said that the scripture might be fulfilled. They gave him vinegar or gall to drink. This is Psalm 69. So this is actually what's going through the meditations of Yeshua's mind as he's dying. Let them be condemned. Let them, there's a phrase, a relevant phrase that says, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. As a prayer for the ignorant, which is very important because when we look at the ignorant, this is something that's been totally negated as we go into justification in the New Testament prospect of what's really happening here in the Bible. The ignorant are able to be forgiven because they continue not in willful sin. Willful sin in Hebrews chapter 10, where it says in verse 26, if we sin willfully, after we have received the knowledge of the truth, there is no more sacrifice for your sins, but a fiery indignation and wrath which shall devour the adversaries. See, because the adversaries have already been prayed against that they be, indignation and wrath against them. That's Hebrews 10, 26, 27, right? Because they despised the spirit of grace, just like others despised Moses' law. Well, when you look at this situation here, Paul says, but I received mercy, but he's talking about himself being a chief sinner, Paul the apostle. And he said, but I received mercy or forgiveness because I did it in ignorance. You see, there's a big difference between doing something ignorantly and doing something with the knowledge of the truth presumptuously. See, those who do these things after they've received the knowledge of the truth, they don't have that, if you will, mercy, favor, or grace that you keep seeing being spoken of throughout the Bible. Why? Because they're doing it, what the scripture would say, presumptuously. To do something presumptuously basically means to do it with a high or defiant hand. It's somebody who is standing there saying, I know what it is you require, but I won't do it, or even just, maybe they just think they can't do it, even though they know they should be doing it. I don't know. But, hey, it's what it is. Now, when we take a look at Isaiah chapter 49, now look at this in Isaiah chapter 49 and verse 8. It says, thus saith Yahweh, in acceptable time have I heard you, and in the day of salvation I have helped you and will preserve you and will give thee for a covenant of the people to establish the earth, to cause to inherit the desolate places. This is all talking about priesthood. It's talking about priesthood, and it's talking about his exaltation. The writer of Hebrews had it dead on right. When you actually see this being spoken of, I give you a couple verses, like in John chapter 11, verse 42, it says, and I knew that thou hearest me always, but because of the people that stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. In another place, he says, I know that you hear me because I always do those things which are pleasing unto you, or always obey your will, basically. In John chapter 17, verses 4 and 5, Yeshua said, I have glorified you on earth. I have finished the work which you had given me to do. And now, O Father, glorify thou me with thine own self, with the glory which I had with you. Right? Why? Because he had manifested his name, because he had made known the things which Yahweh had required unto the apostles, and because he had given his disciples his words. Now, when you take a look at Hebrews chapter 12, going back there, in Hebrews chapter 12 and in verse 28, it says, wherefore we receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, let us have grace whereby we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear, for our God is a consuming fire. You see, let us serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. Why? Because God don't play. God is a consuming fire. If you go against him, and if you do it after you receive the knowledge of the truth, you're in a lot of trouble. See, this is why Peter would say something to the effect of, it would have been better for them never to have known the way of righteousness than after they had known the holy commandment to have turned away from it. But it has happened to them according to the true proverb, as the dog returns to his vomit and the pig, right, or the sow, they put in the King James Version, to its wallowing in the mire or in the filth or excrement, however you want to put that. It would have been better for them never to have known the way of righteousness. That's a Hebraic term that's a Hebraic term equivalent to, it would have been better for them that they had never been born. Very heavy statement from a Hebraic perspective, for somebody to tell you it would have been better for you if you had never been born. Surely we would not want to be in that situation. That means you have a great great deal of punishment ahead of you, such as which you will wish you had never been born. It would have been better for them never to have known the way of righteousness than after they had been delivered the holy commandment to turn away from it. When we take a look at Hebrews chapter 2, verse 9, and it really goes to Hebrews chapter 3, verse 4. In Hebrews chapter 2 and verse 9, it says, "But we see Yeshua, who is made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that by the grace of God should taste death for every man." Isn't that crazy? Isn't that wild? That's the grace of God, is to taste death, to die and suffer. That's why I'm telling you, the way they use this word grace, like you just saw before, we having grace should serve God with uh, fear and godly reverence. See, they actually see grace as favor upon them for doing or help in doing what is God's will, even if it's laying down your own life. See, grace is something much like power to them. Matter of fact, let me share a couple verses about grace that you might not be aware of and the way that the Hebrews perceive grace while I'm thinking about it. You can actually see grace. Grace is something that you can see. Like when you look outside or when you see somebody, you can see grace. And a lot of people don't understand that from a Hebrew perspective. You can. This is Acts chapter 11 and verse 23. I'll give you an example of what I mean about you can see grace. In Acts chapter 11, verse 23, it says, "Who when he came and had seen the grace of God was glad and exhorted them all that with purpose of heart they would cleave unto the Lord." So how is it here that it's actually saying that the apostle here saw the grace of God? It means that he had actually seen their faith, which they were exhibiting here. When he had come there, he actually saw them doing the will of God. He had seen the grace of God. That means the effects or the fruits of righteousness that was there in that community. He was seeing the grace or favor of God upon this holy community who was living in holiness. That's what it meant that he saw the grace of God. Meaning, if he had showed up there and the people had been living in a perverted and perverse way, if he had showed up there and he had seen these people living in their communities in iniquity, well, he would not have seen the grace of God. What he would have actually saw would have been, like it says in other places, an abomination, right, before his eyes. But notice here in Acts 11:23, who when he came, he had seen the grace of God was glad. So see, he saw God's grace and was glad. What does that mean? He had saw the favor on these people, that they were blessed in their good deeds. People don't really know that you can see grace. Grace can be brought to you, right? Like I can bring you grace, or we can even send grace, like where it says grace and peace from God the Father, Lord Jesus Christ. But grace can be brought to you, which can mean just knowledge of what to do, what is right. See, that can be grace. John chapter 1 attests to this, I believe. John chapter 1, 16 and 17, it says, "And of his fullness have we all received in grace for grace. For the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth came through Yeshua Mashiach," right? So what grace and truth came through him? Yes, through his words, his teachings, his life. When we actually take a look at grace as well, it's power. They see it as power that actually works with you, which is really interesting way to phrase it, to tell you the truth. But in 1 Corinthians 15:10, check out what the apostle says here about grace. In 1 Corinthians 15:10, it says, "But by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace, which was bestowed upon me." They add the word "was bestowed." It shouldn't be there. And I think it kind of messes it up anyway. So I'll read it the way it should be. The "was bestowed" is an interpolation into the text. But it says, by the grace of God, I am what I am, and his grace, which was upon me, was not in vain, but I labored more abundantly than they all, yet not I, but the grace of God, which was with me. What do you mean the grace of God that was with you? See, here he's talking about the favor that God gave him in calling him to do his service. This is why he's saying that I didn't receive it in vain, meaning his calling. He's seeing his calling as just as grace, that God called him, this is what you shall do. And he sees this as high honor and favor before God. You chosen me, Father, to do your will. I have found grace in thy sight. I have found honor before you. I will do what you command me, O God. Let your enemies fall before your face. I will lay them down in disgrace. You see this type of deal, right? It's like to be called by God, they saw it as a beat your chest badge of honor. You see that God had called you forth to do his will. And Paul says, I didn't receive it in vain. When he called me, I labored more abundantly than you all. It's called Paul's has a very zealous personality, very zealous individual here. You see, look how zealous he was before he was called, and that he was wasting the church and murdering people. He thought he was doing God a service, right? That's it. Yeshua said the time will come when those who persecute you or those who will kill you think they do God a service. See, they think they're doing what God's willing, right? They think they're acting in his favor, you see. But here, Paul, once he was called into his grace, meaning once he was called into the favor of Yahweh, Yahweh called him to do what he must. He went forth with all zealousness to serve God with all his heart, with all his mind, right? With every bit of his strength. This is what he means by the grace of God that was with me or in me, or which was with me. You say in me, etc. When you actually take a look at grace being powered as well, you take a look at Colossians chapter 1, verses 28 and 29. In Colossians chapter 1, verses 28 and 29, it says, whom we preach, warning every man and teaching every man in all wisdom, that we may present every man perfect. That means fully mature, complete, whole, without defect, without spot, without blemish. I like the phrase from the Amplified. It doesn't use it here, but it uses another place. Uncompromisingly righteous, unbending, unbribable, unreprovable, unrebukable, unmovable, right? In Yeshua Messiah. Whereunto I also labor, striving according to his working, which worketh in me mightily. You see how there in 1 Corinthians 15, he sees that grace is the working of God. That's totally different than what people tell you. So that puts a whole new spin on Ephesians 2:10, doesn't it? We are saved by grace through faith. You come through faith and enter into this favor. With loyalty comes favor. That's what Paul is telling you. With a loyal heart towards God and committing your ways unto the Lord, there is favor, which is grace. Grace really isn't the best word in our modern language. I'm just going to tell you the truth, because grace is one of those words that don't really mean anything. You know what I'm saying? Like if we were like, oh, that's so graceful. What do we really mean in our society? When we say something is graceful, we mean they did it in a way that seemed, like perfect, right? Like it makes me think of a gymnast, like, and they're doing the backflips and they'll say, oh, they did it with such grace, meaning they made it look so easy. So it's really not the best connotation that we have today, the way we use the word grace. And even the way that people use grace in theological circles, when we hear the word grace, what we often think when we hear grace is what has been given to us as unmerited favor, which means like grace is just kind of something that's like unwarranted. Now, when it comes to forgiveness, forgiveness could be equated this way. Like if you did something wrong and you were forgiven, That would be in this connotation of forgiveness, right? But when he says we are saved by grace through faith, that's talking about the loyalty and commitment unto God that leads us into his favor and his standing. When we talk about standing with Yah, this is a very deeply enriched concept throughout the entire history of the Tanakh. To have standing with Yah means that you have integrity of moral character, right? So Abraham had integrity of moral character. So Abraham could stand before Yah and he could say, in grace, right, in the favor of his standing, Yah, if you can find this many righteous people in Sodom, please spare the city. Yah will answer him. Well, if I find this many, Abraham, I will. Well, Yah, if you find this many, please spare the place. Oh, you know the story, so I'm just paraphrasing it. See, that means there that you have grace, favor to stand before Yah because you are a person of righteous moral integrity and character. It's much different than what we think about, isn't it? Like Tobit chapter 1 is a good example that just came to mind. We read it sometimes to talk about status or standing, but it actually mentions grace or favor there as well. So let me pull this out of, hold on a second. All right, mic check. All right. So let me pull this out of Tobit here to show you what I mean by grace or favor is standing or a good reputation before Yah. And they do use the word versatility, but you get the point. Tobit chapter 1, it says in verse 13, the Most High gave me favor. You see? The Most High gave me grace. Well, let's read what he means by this. So this is Tobit 1:13. I'm reading out of the New Oxford Annotated Bible with Apocrypha. It says, the Most High gave me favor and good standing with Shalmaneser, and I used to buy everything he needed, right? Another version would say, and I was his purchasing agent, meaning I was the one who worked on his behalf in service. See, grace is related to service. Grace is related to favor. Favor is good standing before Yah. Why? But you don't have good standing before Yah because you're out here doing evil. We just read all those verses, what's going to happen to the wicked and the evil. No, you have grace, you have good favor before Yah because you are serving him faithfully, in faith, in fidelity, uncompromising loyalty and dedication, devout reverential service or godly fear are some of the terms that we read earlier. So when we talk about grace as well, Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16, for example, and Hebrews chapter 4, look at this, right? Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16 actually says, let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. See, look how they're using grace and mercy differently here. The word mercy in this phrase is Elihos, which means compassion, divine or active, tender mercy. Hebrews 4:16, the word grace here, here's how they render it, charis, graciousness of the manner of act, abstract or concrete, literally, figuratively, or spiritually, especially divine influence upon the heart and its relation in the life, including gratitude, acceptable, right? You're found acceptable. That's not the way people think about grace, is it? Benefit, favor, gift, grace, gracious, pleasure, thankworthy, that you are thankworthy or praiseworthy. You know, So here it says, let us therefore come boldly before the throne of grace. Well, you can't come before the throne of grace unless you have good standing. Let's keep it real. So, that we may find mercy. Now, see, mercy there in a situation is something that would be somebody could make a fact of saying maybe something unmerited, right? Kind of like my brother did something against me he shouldn't have did. And I have the power in my hand to forgive or to condemn. If I choose to forgive, I have shown mercy, but he didn't do anything to deserve it. Matter of fact, he's transgressed against me. But this is tender mercy or loving kindness. And I think this is where a lot of the Christians confuse grace, mercy, and especially in a lot of the different relevant phrases that you see when grace is being spoken of in the Bible, like we are not under the law, but under grace, like that phrase there from Romans chapter 6. But see, there it's talking about good standing in the fact that you're no longer under condemnation because now you have made your instruments obedient unto Yah. So it's saying that because you no longer sin in the flesh, Romans chapter 6, verse 1 says, shall we continue in sin that grace may or abound or something like that? God forbid. How are we the dead to sin live any longer therein? Something to this effect, right? And then when you look there, he's actually talking about the fact that you have yielded yourselves instruments in obedience unto righteousness. So the grace of God is with you, or his good favor and standing is upon you. Again, something that can be seen. What's interesting about that as well? When you take a look at Hebrews, no, let me not go to Hebrews in Ephesians. In Ephesians 3. Like watch this in Ephesians 3, right? I think it's verse Ephesians chapter 3, verse 14 through 16, right? It says, for this cause I bow my knees unto the Father of our Lord Yeshua Messiah, of whom the whole family in heaven and earth is named, that he may grant you according to the riches of his glory to be strengthened with might by his Spirit in the inner man, that Messiah may dwell in your hearts by faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all saints what is the breadth, the length, the depth, and the height, and to know the love of Christ which passeth all knowledge, that you might be filled with all the fullness of God. So you see there that to be strengthened with might by his ruach in the inner man. See, that's talking about grace there. It's talking about that working of grace or favor upon you, to be led in the right way, to be strengthened in the places you are weak. Like when Paul said, for example, he was going through all this hell, right? Just to kind of make it quick. Paul was going through a lot of hell, and he said, I prayed 3 times that it should be taken from me. But then he said, he was answered, my grace is sufficient for you. See, grace there didn't have anything to do with like my unmerited merit is sufficient for you. Yeah, I mean, I'm going through hell. Oh God, yeah, my grace is good for you. Go on now. No, he's saying that the strength, uh, the resolve, uh, they use another word in the Greek. It's way better in the Greek, the endowment, because they translate this word gift in the King James Version Bible. Like a lot of they translate this word is translated gift or free gift, but it doesn't mean gift. It doesn't mean free gift. I mean, it can mean that, but biblically speaking, it's much more appropriate to say endowment, and an endowment of power that comes in by having good standing, you know, with another person. Now, when you look at this as well in Hebrews 11, verse 34, and then I'm going to switch gears. I'm going to switch gears off of Greg because I could spend a while on this. But it says in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 34, it says, quench the violence of fire, escape the edge of the sword, Out of weakness were made strong. You see, that's grace. That out of weakness they were made strong. See, Paul was weak and he was petitioning God. He said, my grace is sufficient for you, meaning he was made strong, wax valiant in fight, turn the flight of the enemy. So this is power you're talking about. Matter of fact, there might be one other one that I'll share with you. Maybe it's Ephesians 3:6. Ephesians 3:6, yeah, and 7. Here it is. That the Gentiles should be fellow heirs of the same body, partakers of the promise in Mashiach by the gospel, whereof I, Paul, am made a minister according to the gift of the grace of God given unto me by the effectual working of his power. See, he's telling you that through the effectual working of God's power in his life, he's been given grace through the effectual working of power. That's Ephesians 3:7. Let me read this in a couple other translations, may make it more contemporary for you. It says, I became a servant of this gospel according to the gift of God's grace that was given to me by the exercise of his power. The CEV says, God treated me with kindness. His power worked in me, and it became my job to spread the good news. See, the CEV actually understands this. They understand that relevant term, grace, there is actually referring to Paul's calling in the gospel. And because of this, he found good favor standing with Yahweh, being called, right? God's not going to call anybody that can't perform his services. I think that's the point, right? That's why the wicked don't come to Yah. Ephesians 3:7, this is the GMB. I was made a servant of the gospel by God's special gift. They translate grace, special gift, which he gave me through the working of his power. I am least and less than all of God's people, yet God gave me the privilege of taking to the Gentiles the good news about the infinite riches of Christ. So you can see here that this word grace being used in the majority of these places is relevantly talking about the fact that you found good favor and standing with Yahweh because of his calling, that you have been chosen by him in order to fulfill his will or to act on his behalf in some capacity. This takes us back to where we were talking about that priesthood, right? Yeshua, he received grace from God. Yeshua received favor from the Almighty. That's the whole point, because Hebrews chapter 5 says he was called. You see, so he had to be called. Yeshua had to be given grace. Yeshua had to be saved. Yeshua had to be declared righteous or justified. And matter of fact, he had to be justified in the Spirit. Per 1 Timothy 3. It's like people just don't get it. They don't think about Yeshua this way because, of course, he's God. Why would God need to be justified? Why does God need to be given? You see, but this is kind of why it's hard for them to understand these things. But in Hebrews chapter 5, remember it says, and no man takes this honor upon himself, but he that is called of God, right? As was Aaron. You see, Aaron was somebody who had grace before the Almighty or good standing. So moving beyond that. So Jesus was appointed like Moses and Aaron was. Okay. This is Hebrews chapter 3, verse 2. In Hebrews chapter 3, verse 2, it says, he was faithful to God who chose him to do this work, just as Moses was faithful in all his works of God's house. You see what I'm telling you? This is the GMB Bible, Hebrews 3:1 and 3:2. It says, who also have been called by God. Think of Jesus, whom God sent to be the high priest of the faith we profess. He was faithful to God who chose him to do this work, just as Moses was faithful in all his house. The King James Version Bible here is much better. Wherefore, holy brethren, partakers of the heavenly calling, because that's really what it is, the heavenly calling. Consider, or the divine calling, right? I believe the word there is actually It's the word epirenos, which means above the sky or celestial. So I don't know why the GMB did that, but King James much better here. The heavenly calling considered the apostle and high priest of our profession, Christ Jesus, who was faithful to him that appointed him, as also was Moses was faithful in all of his house. So see, he had to be faithful in all that he was appointed in order to have this covenant of priesthood. When you take a look, let's go to 1 Samuel 12 and 6 when we talk about Moses and Aaron, right? In 1 Samuel chapter 12 and verse 6, it says, and Samuel said unto the people, it is Yahweh that advanced Moses and Aaron. That's the King James Version. This word advanced means appointed. It's the Hebrew word ashah, which means he made. And it's aith. It means even namely of self. So if you look at this, appointed, it's the same thing the writer of Hebrews is saying. Let me get the Septuagint. The Septuagint says, and Samuel spoke to the people saying, the Lord who appointed Moses and Aaron is witness, who brought our fathers up out of Egypt. So see, they were appointed. This is what the writer of Hebrews is telling you about Messiah. He had to be appointed to be a priest of the heavenly calling going into Hebrews 5, right? Now, when we take a look, why? Because he was faithful, as was Moses. To be faithful means full of faith. It's a compound word in our English, right? Who is faithful. Matter of fact, let me go back there to Hebrews chapter 3. So it says, who is faithful? That's the word pistis, means trustworthy. Bet you didn't see that coming. So it means they were full of faith, or they were trustworthy, or they were loyal. You know, loyal people are the ones you can trust. You can't trust disloyal people. Okay. You know what I'm saying? It's like very simple to get this thing. Now, Abraham is another person who's called faithful, by the way, while I'm thinking about it. I think that's in Galatians 3. It says maybe he's called the father of faith, that we are blessed with faithful Abraham, something like that. But we're blessed with faithful Abraham in Galatians 3. I know that it uses that phrase. Blessed in faithful Abraham or blessed with faithful Abraham, all the same. But what does that mean with faithful Abraham? Because he was loyal. That's why I'm telling you that it means loyal. It means somebody who's devoted and devoted loyalty unto Yahweh. See, that word faith means absolutely really nothing in our modern society today but mere belief. I mean, it's been so, I don't know, divested of meaning. But anyway, now let's see how God made these covenants previously, right? So now we're going to go to Levi, because we were talking about this earlier, is kind of what got me thinking about it. In Malachi chapter 2 and verse 7, matter of fact, I'll start at verse 4. And ye know that I have sent this commandment unto you, that my covenant might be with Levi, saith Yahweh of hosts. My covenant was with him of life and peace, and I gave them to him for the fear wherewith he feared me, and was afraid before my name. Does that sound like Hebrews 5? That's where he's pulling this, right? Hebrews 5, and the days of his flesh made strong crying and tears and supplication unto him that was able to save him from death, and he was heard in that he feared. Malachi 2:5, my covenant was with Levi. I gave it to him for the fear wherewith he feared me and was afraid before my name. That word fear means to fear morally and frightened reverence, to be terrified and afraid. Good Lord. So what does that mean? Hey, man, they didn't want to go against the Most High. They knew that they didn't want to play with that. Why? We read it earlier in Hebrews, for Elohim is a consuming fire. They said, let it, hey, that we got the grace of God. He said, let us serve. Hey, we got grace, y'all. Look how opposite this is from the Christians that we talk to most of the time in Hebrews. In Hebrews, they're like, look, guys, we got the grace of God. So now let's make sure we serve God with fear and with godly reverence, because God's a consuming fire. That's like the total opposite of what you think about when you talk to these Christians. You know what I mean? They're like, look, everybody, we got grace. Make sure we serve with fear. All right? Be afraid. Be very terrified, because if we go against the Most High, we'll be devoured. Make sure you serve him in godly reverence. Give him his due respect, because those who dishonor him will be dishonored, but those who honor him will be praised of the same. Get yourself in order. Get right. The time's coming. The day is at hand. Judgment's at the door. You know, it's like this type of stuff, man. It's like I don't know what people don't think of the mind frame of what's going on here. You see, it's like when you think about that. Mm, mm, mm. But you know, let me show you the fear that Levi. This is what Yahweh's talking about, right? It's Exodus 32. Let me show you the type of fear, the type of faith that Levi had. So this is Exodus chapter 32, verse 25. And when Moses saw that the people were naked, for Aaron had made them naked unto their shame amongst their enemies, then Moses stood in the gate of the camp, and he said, who is on Yahweh's side? Let him come unto me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves unto him. And he said unto them, thus saith Yahweh Elohim of Israel, put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from the gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor. And the children of Levi did according to the word of Moses. See, that's some fear right there, brother. You kill your own companion. This word in the Hebrew, companion, is rai, your associate, your brother, your companion, your friends, your husband, your lover. Indicative also of a spouse. Jeez. So Moses commands them to kill every man his brother, his akh, a brother, used in the widest sense of the literal relationship, metaphoric, affinity, or resemblance. Another brother, kindred, like, and every man his companion, his associate, his brother, his companion, his fellow, his friend, the husband, the lover, the neighbor, spouse, and every man his neighbor, karob, that is near to them, akin to them, allied with them, cherished, kinfolk, kin, near, neighbor, next, nigh, at hand, near of kin. And the children of Levi did according to the word of Moses. And there fell of the people that day about 3,000 men. For Moses had said, consecrate yourselves today unto Yahweh, even every man upon his son, good Lord, and upon his brother, and he may bestow upon you a blessing this day. Good God. Son, Ben, a son, a builder of a family name, relationship, including your grandson. Yeah. See, this is very, see here, this is the CV. Moses said, you obeyed Yahweh and did what was right, and you will serve as his priest for the people of Israel. It was hard for you to kill your own sons and your brothers, but Yahweh has blessed you and made you his priest today. Good Lord. That's the fear wherewith Levi feared him. These people was ready to take out their own flesh because they feared Yahweh. This is Numbers chapter 25 and verse 5, right? And this is going to lead us up to Yeshua right here, because this is ultimately what this is talking about when Yeshua says you must hate your brother and your mother and your children and all this, or you can't be my disciple. Just like Moses called the people to him, he said, who is on Yahweh's side? I mean, you got to make a choice here. You got to make a choice. They made their choice, and they were blessed for their choice. Yahweh made his covenant with Levi for the fear for which they feared him. Yeshua, he was heard in that he feared. You know what the Most High told Yeshua? You got to die a humiliating death and be faithful unto the end, and you shall be blessed. Good Lord. I beheld Yahweh always before my face. He is on my right hand that I cannot be moved. Therefore will my heart rest in hope. My flesh, you see, shall rest in hope, or whatever. For thou will not suffer that Holy One to see corruption. Some deep stuff right here, man. This is Numbers chapter 25. In Numbers chapter 25, we read in the 5th verse, KJV, and Moses said unto the judges of Israel, stay ye every one his men that were joined unto Baal Peor. What does that mean? Let me matter of fact, let me start it. Let me read through verse 12, right? To stay every man means to kill there. They translate that as stay there. That's interesting. Slay. Shit, I read it wrong. All right. And Moses said unto the judges of Israel, slay every one his men that were joined unto Baal Peor. See, here they're having to kill their brethren again. And behold, one of the children of Israel came and brought unto his brethren a Midianitish woman in the sight of Moses and in the sight of the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping before the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Well, of course, they're weeping at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation because a lot of their people just got X'd off, right? So this guy, in his boldness and audacity, brings up this Midianitish, whorish woman through the midst. Like, he must, I mean, this guy, what's this guy doing, man? He's he's worried about laying down with somebody. Then what's going on? It's just almost unfathomable, right? I guess this is why Phinehas gets so zealous. So it says here in verse 7, when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose up from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand, and he went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. So the plague was stayed from the children of Israel, and those that died in the plague were 24,000. And Yahweh said unto Moses, saying, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, have turned my wrath away from me, or away from the children of Israel, while he was zealous for my sake among them, that I consume not the children of Israel in my jealousy. Wherefore say, behold, I give unto him my covenant of peace, and he shall have it, and his seed after him, even the covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for his God and made an atonement for the children of Israel. This is why Mashiach became an everlasting priest. Mashiach became an everlasting priest because he was zealous for the name of his God, sanctified God before the eyes of the people, abiding righteous unto the end, staying in perfect moral and good character, and was zealous for his name's sake. And he feared. Because of this, Yahweh rewarded him openly, rose him from the dead, and justifying him through the resurrection of the dead, made his covenant with him, because he had sanctified his name, or was very zealous for the sake of his name amongst the children of Israel. That's what the Mashiach did. When you take a look at Deuteronomy 33 verses, let me go to Deuteronomy chapter 33 verse 8. It says, and Levi said, let thy Thummim and Urim be with thy Holy One, whom thou didst prove at Massa, and with whom thou didst strive at the waters of Meribah, who said unto his father and to his mother, I have not seen him, neither did he acknowledge his brethren, nor knew his own children, for they have observed your word and kept your covenant. See, so what does it mean? I didn't see them, didn't know them. That like they didn't even know him. This is um, it was talking about the tribe of Levi. When you take a look at, let me read a different translation here. This says Deuteronomy 33 verse 8. At Massa Meribah spring, Yahweh tested you, tribe of Levi. You were faithful, and so the priesthood belongs to Levi's tribe. Protecting Israel's agreement with Yahweh was more important to you than the life of your father and your mother, your brothers, your sisters, and your own children. You know how many Tanakh only people say about Luke chapter 14? You know the verse, right? I believe it's Luke 14, where it says, if any man hate not his mother, his brother, his children, his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. You know how people see that? Like I've seen rabbis go to Luke. Let me read it to you real quick. I want to show you how deceitful, how these people are just liars. I've seen that. You may have seen it too. You might have seen this so many times. People do this. They'll say that's not the Most High. Luke 14 verses 20. Luke 14:26. Here it is. Now, in Luke 14:26, it says, if any man come to me, remember Moses said, come to me. They came to Moses, who? Levi. He says, if any man come to me, see, Yeshua is the prophet like Moses. If any man come to me and hate not his father and mother and wife and children and brethren and sisters, yea, in his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whosoever doeth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have ought to finish it? Then he starts going in, right? You know how many Tanakh only people, when I used to debate them back in the days, how much they would bring this up? I've had rabbis bring this up to me too. They say, that's not what the Torah teaches us. The Torah teaches us to love the children of Israel and that we should love our neighbor. And he's going against the Torah. Well, I guess Moses didn't get that note because Moses just straight up said, come to me. And Levi came to him. And then he said, go out now and kill every man his brother, every man his companion, which we read what that was, your spouse, your lover, your nearest friend, and your neighbor, your kinfolk. And then we also just read in Deuteronomy 33, who said to his father and his mother, let me read this in the CV. I feel like it's easier in the CV here. Who thought more important his agreement with Yahweh than the life of his father or mother or brothers or sisters or his own children. So what you gonna do with that, man? I mean, when it's time to separate, it's time to separate. That's the whole point. That's why Yeshua said, "Think not that I've come to bring peace. I've come not to bring peace, but a sword. For a man's enemies shall be those of his own household." It's time to divide. It's time to divide those who want to serve your idols, those who don't want to go with the prophet. Choose you this day. But as for me and my house, we will serve Yahweh, right? You know what's interesting about that too? Do you know that not listening to the prophet is idolatry? People don't think about that. when you don't obey God's prophet, that's actually idolatry. A lot of people think idolatry is just like when you worship idols, but idolatry is also not following what the prophet said. It's likened just unto it in 1 Samuel chapter 15. Um, in 1 Samuel chapter 15, it actually says here, and Samuel said, hath Yahweh as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of Yahweh? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken better than the fat of rams. That's how we know Hebrews 10, Psalm 40. My ear have you pierced, a body you have prepared me, is talking about somebody made ready to be obedient to the word given. Lo, I come in the volume of the book. It is written of me to do thy will, O God. And people argue us up and down about that, but that's fine. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice. See, sacrifice and offering you would have not, but my ear have you opened. To obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is the sin of witchcraft. They add is as. That's why I didn't read it. I'm looking at it right now on it's in italics. So they add that. But it says, for rebellion, the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness, they add is as there to its italics. As I'm looking at it, that means it's not there. And it says, and stubbornness, iniquity, and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of Yahweh, he has also rejected you from being king. And Saul said unto Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of Yahweh and your words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. See? So he went against the prophet, he went against Yahweh. Going against the prophets, going against Yahweh, going against Yahweh is idolatry. That's why Paul could say something like, covetousness is idolatry. Covetousness, which is idolatry. The Apostle Paul says, I believe, in Ephesians chapter 5. Well, how can the Apostle Paul say covetousness is idolatry? How can he say covetousness, which is idolatry? Because covetousness is actually seeking after your own will, your own desires. Or, in that phrase, relevant term that he uses there in Ephesians chapter 5, is to want what is another's based upon your own selfish gratification. So it's idolatry. When we take a look at and I'm about to wrap this thing up here. I'm trying to think of why I even went there. When you don't listen to the prophet, it's idolatry. Yeah. See, this is why going against the Messiah would be considered idolatry. That's what I was thinking. Because these Tanakh only people and these rabbis and stuff like this say, well, we ought to only serve the Most High Yahweh. But actually, if you don't listen to the prophet who Yahweh has sent, you're actually in idolatry because you have a stiff neck and have rebelled against the words of his prophet. I mean, I bet they didn't think that one out, did they? Because a lot of these Tanakh only people really don't read the Tanakh. I've had many years of having to and it's crazy too when these people do this. But anyway, that's fine. When you take a look at that, right? So yeah, I'll cap this off with Matthew 10:34. In Matthew chapter 10, verse 34, it says, and I saw Ace come in here earlier, man. Ace comes in here and he just straight rips up his hand every time. And then he comes up here and he don't be talking about nothing, man. He'd be trailing off and somewhere else. Matthew 10:34, think not that I've come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's foes shall be those of his own household. He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. He that love his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he that taketh not up his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. I've seen people like Albiel and other Trinitarians use this verse. And what they'll do is they'll try to deceive you because, they're full of iniquity. So they'll try to deceive you and they'll go back to like Deuteronomy where it says, love the Lord thy God with all your heart. And they'll see, well, can you love two people with all your heart? And then they'll say, see, this is Jesus telling you he's God. I mean, they're obsessed with that stuff, but that it doesn't have anything to do with the narrative whatsoever. Matter of fact, it's coming from Micah chapter 7, by the way, and it's coming from this example with Levi and Moses. Yeshua is the prophet like unto Moses. Like you saw, he said, come unto me, just like Moses said, come unto me, and the Levites came unto him. And then he commanded them. It said, by the word of Moses. It didn't even say by the word of Yahweh. Did y'all hear that? He said, and it said, let me read that again in Deuteronomy, what it actually said there, or Exodus. It was Exodus, wasn't it? Yeah. Exodus chapter 32. Look at what it said here in the Torah. In Exodus chapter 32 and verse uh, 28. And the children of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and there fell of the people that day 3,000 men. So you see there, they had to do what Yahweh's prophet said. In Matthew 10:34, we read that. It says in verse 36, 37, 38, and he that taketh not up his cross and follows me is not worthy of me. He that findeth his life shall lose it. He that loseth his life for my sake shall find it. That means that covenant of life and peace, right? We've been reading about it the whole time. So that's where we get that priesthood from. Yeshua was found faithful unto death. God highly exalted him. He was made a priest, which consecrated the Son forevermore. How was he consecrated? He was consecrated before the eyes of Yahweh because of his reverential fear and obedience towards the Most High, as we saw very clearly. His sacrifice was the affliction for righteousness that he suffered at the hands of the wicked, but he was heard, and that he feared he was saved, and a covenant was made. And we see very clearly he was appointed, just like Aaron and Moses were appointed, because he was faithful, according to Hebrews chapter 3, which means full of faith, or like we saw, he was trustworthy. And because of this, God made an everlasting covenant with him for his zeal and for the fact that he was zealous for the name of his God. And so being sanctified, sanctifying God before the eyes of the people, and ultimately receiving the reward after he had finished the works which were given him to do, according to John 17. So